Hello and welcome to Watershed Watch's chlorophyll filtration video. So in your monitoring supplies, you will have a kit that looks something like this. This is our chlorophyll kit. And on about an every 2-week basis, you will collect samples and filter them so that we can analyze them later on for algae or chlorophyll level. This is best done. You collect the sample at your monitoring site and then you bring that sample to shore, and preferably in your car or out of direct sunlight, or maybe even back in your kitchen, you do the rest of the filtration. So in your monitoring kit, your chlorophyll kit will include 2 filter holders, and that's to remind you that we're going to filter each sample twice. You will have 2 bottles. These wide mouth bottles, they're what we call our workhorse bottles, because you're going to bring them out with you every other time you go monitoring and collect 2 samples. So the bottles are marked 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. And that's to remind you that you want to collect 2 samples at the same date, the same depth, and the same time. And you'll use your water sampler. If you've got a deep sampler, you'll use that typically to collect samples from 1 meter or 1/2 meter from the surface. Or if you have a shallow sampler, that's set for 1 meter from the surface. You'll collect samples into that bottle. And if you don't have a sampler at all, if you've got a shallower site, or maybe you're monitoring from a dock, you're just gonna take the top off and scoop your sample directly into there. So that's what you're gonna bring out on the water. The rest of the stuff you'll keep on shore. In your monitoring, your chlorophyll kit, you'll also have a syringe, and that's marked at 50 ml. That's to remind us that that is the usual volume we'll be filtering. You'll have a bottle with magnesium carbonate. This stuff settles out really quickly, so when you use it, you need to give it a nice little shake just to make sure that it's kind of milky looking. You'll have a film canister with chlorophyll filters in it. You'll have a sheet of labels, and you'll have forceps. And that's to remind us that we want to be doing this using the forceps because the oils on our fingers can actually degrade the chlorophyll, make the value lower. So again, out of direct sunlight, no wind, no bright light, we're going to set up our filters. So what I like to do is, because I want to take 2 filters from each bottle, I go ahead and I get my filters, both filter holders set up so that I'm ready to filter my first sample. So these filter holders, just unscrew, you lift the top off. Usually the O-ring will be there. Sometimes it gets stuck to the top. No big deal if it does. The filter holders have this screen. We can go ahead, take the other one off. There's my screen, my O-ring, put those aside. And then carefully, again, using my forceps, I'm going to try and separate out 1 filter. Put that on my screen. I'm going to take a second filter, being careful to get only 1 filter. And these are pretty thin filters, and they often get kind of stuck together, so you may have to kind of poke around a little bit to make sure you're getting only 1. And then these filters often have a sort of a rough side and maybe a little smoother side or a grid side. We want to have the rough side up, or the grid, the smooth side to the screen. So I've got my filters in place. I'm just gonna put my O-rings. And you can actually often, just if your O-ring is stuck to the lid because of the water, you can just go ahead and put that in place. It stays right in place, and when you screw it down, it will put the O-ring in the right position. You want to make sure that these are pretty tight. You want them to be what we call hand tight. So you don't want to crank it down so much that you're going to have trouble undoing it, but you do want it to be snug so that no water seeps through there. So now my 2 filter holders are all set. I can put those aside. I like to always recap my filters in between so I don't knock it down, particularly if I'm working where it might be breezy. I'm going to take my syringe. I'm going to mix up a little bit of my sample, and we want to make sure that when we're working with water samples that we keep them well mixed, especially when we're measuring chlorophyll, because algae settles at different rates, so we want to have as well mixed a sample as we can. So I'm going to take the lid off. I'm going to just draw up a little bit of water, and then I'm going to take that a couple times just up and down my syringe, and that's just to make sure that there's no dust or dirt or anything that we might have left from the last time. And I'm just going to get rid of this, just plunge the water out. And then I'm going to carefully pull back on the plunger and then pull it all the way out, and you'll get that nice popping sound. Now I'm going to cap my bottle again. And I'm going to make sure I mix my sample. And now I'm going to put my filter holder on my syringe. And what's nice with these filter holders is you can't do it the wrong way. It's only going to fit one way. And I'm just going to push that, and I just give it a little quarter turn just to make sure it's on there snugly. And now with my finger on the bottom, I'm going to add 50 mils of my well mixed sample. And I want my finger to be on the bottom so that I get an accurate measurement and water's not going through my filter. So you want to read, basically there'll be like a little curvature. So the bottom of that curve you want right at that 50 mil line. Now I'm going to add about 4 drops of my magnesium carbonate. You can see that's kind of settled quickly, so I want to shake that up. And then just add about 4 drops. Doesn't have to be precise. But it is important that we add the magnesium carbonate because that's a preservative. And if it takes us a little while to get all of these filters analyzed, that can help us. So now I'm going to, I can take my finger off now because I've got my measurement. And most of the time you're just going to discard the water. So I've got a container here. I'm going to keep my syringe nice and vertical. That will let the water move across the filter more evenly. I'm going to carefully push the plunger down. And I find if you push it down and twist it, it allows it to break through that seal. You get that snapping noise. Now you know your plunger is in position. And then with a nice, steady, even, slow pressure, I'm going to force all of that 50 mils of water through. I want to make sure that no water is leaking through here. And when I get to that air gap, I'm just going to keep on pushing. This gets rid of all of the excess water. I'm going to pull my filter holder off. And you want to make sure that you do not have your filter holder attached, because the next step is to pull that plunger back out again. And if that filter holder were attached, it would actually rip the filter when that suction happened. So I'm going to put my second filter holder that I have a filter in onto my syringe. I'm going to carefully cap my sample again, tighten it, mix it. Again with my finger on the bottom so no water goes through until I am done measuring. I'm going to pour another 50 mils in right to the bottom of that, the meniscus, that curvature right to the bottom. I'm going to mix my magnesium again because it separates really fast. Add my 4 or so drops. Carefully put my plunger in, pushing and twisting till I get that snap. And if this were a water collection day, In my water sample bottles, I might have a yellow labeled bottle that says filtered on it. And on those water collection days, if you can remember to, it's really helpful for us if you collect some of this water, and that's all it is filtered water. So we're just gonna, again, with a slow, easy pressure, pushing all the way through that air gap, getting rid of the excess water. So now I have my 2 filters from my first sample. I can put that aside. And what we need you to provide with your chlorophyll kit is some kind of a filter. This is a piece of a coffee filter. These work really well. Or a white paper towel. We don't want any kinds of paper towels with ink on it. We don't know how the ink would behave. So I'm just going to take a square out of my coffee filter. I'm going to carefully unscrew my filter holder, remove the O-ring if it didn't stick to the top, and then using the edge of my forceps, I'm going to carefully get underneath my now wet filter. You can see underneath. I'm going to lift that up carefully. If you get some kind of breakage like that just did, don't worry about it. We'll get those pieces on there. So we're just going to take our filter, carefully put it in the middle of our blotting paper. And again, this can be coffee filter or paper towel.